is one of the most talked about CEOs in the world right now, the man behind companies such as SpaceX and Tesla. Mr. Musk, it's a great pleasure to have you in Copenhagen.
Yeah, thanks for having me. I'm glad to be back.
What brings you to Denmark?
I'm here to see the Tesla Danish team. I'm actually visiting a number of countries on this visit. So I just came from Luxembourg, and I'm headed to Germany and Netherlands and Belgium. So here to see the team, see how things are going, talk to some of the people in government and so forth.
What message do you bring to Denmark?
Well, I think the most important message is that Denmark is a great leader in renewable energy with wind, and I think that there's an opportunity to be a leader in sustainable transport as well. But although Denmark is doing incredibly well on wind, if you look at, say, how many cars going down the road are electric, there's very few, well under 1%. So I think it's very important that government policy continue to support electric vehicles, and you know, as more wind energy is generated, it makes sense to put that into sustainable transport. I think there are sort of two very important halves of the same problem. So I think it's.
Is Denmark an interesting market for Tesla, a small country like Denmark?
Yeah, I think for Denmark. I think Denmark can serve as an example to the rest of the world to say what can be done with the sustainable transport. So with larger countries, it's difficult to make a big impact. But with smaller countries, you can say, hey, this is what it can be like to other countries to say, you know, with the right policies, you can have a significant number of electric vehicles on the road. So I think Denmark can be an important leader in the world as an example in this regard.
You mentioned wind. Denmark has the world's largest windmill maker, Vestas, and a large production of sustainable energy.
Right.
But we do have trouble storing the wind energy.
Yes.
Can you help us with that?
Absolutely. So the electric vehicles themselves can be obviously a great recipient to buffer wind energy. So depending upon what level of wind energy is being generated, you can actually have the pricing of electricity vary so that people can charge their electric cars depending upon if there's a large amount or a small amount of energy being generated from the wind. Then in addition, Tesla has a battery pack, a stationary battery pack, that is under development and will go into significant production later this year. And so combining wind energy with a stationary storage is very powerful because that provides a complete solution.
Would you consider setting up a facility in Denmark even?
Yeah, that is certainly something under consideration, yeah.
Okay. Tesla is improving battery technology really fast. How do you expect your battery technology will change the auto sector as well as the energy sector in the coming years?
Well, I think for the battery technology, both for electric vehicles and for stationary storage, is a critical piece of the equation for a long-term future of sustainable energy. So you need to have sustainable energy generation, which I think is going to be primarily wind and solar, and then you combine that with stationary storage, which is needed because of the intermittent nature of renewable energy generation, and then the third piece of the equation is electric transport. So if you have all three of those pieces, sustainable generation, storage, and electric vehicles, then you have a complete solution for the future, and then we have a good future.
But how do you feel about taking on such large industries as the auto industry and the energy industry?
Well, it can be quite difficult at times. The big car companies and the big energy companies have quite sharp elbows, so they try to, various times they try to squash small companies like Tesla. But I think we have the support generally we have the popular support, and we have a very dedicated team at Tesla. So, it's hard, but I think we're making good progress.
Tesla is really getting sales going, really getting cars out there. You've been able to get a head start on other electric car makers, but they are really coming along now.
Which I think is great. Yeah.
Yeah. What is your response to the new competing electric sports cars, such as Porsche's new electric car?
Yeah. Well, the reason that we're doing Tesla is to try to accelerate the advent of sustainable transport, to have there be more electric cars on the road. And to that end, we actually open sourced all of our patents. So we said, any car company can use our technology. It's no problem. They don't even have to pay a fee to us. So for us, we're very philosophically motivated. We care about the advancement of electric vehicles because we think, unless there's sustainable transport, the future is going to be terrible. So I'm glad to see these announcements of these other companies. I hope they move even faster than they announce.
But don't you expect maybe your investors to expect you to fight off this competition rather than embracing it?
Well, yeah. I mean, I did say that when we were in public. Even I said, look, Tesla has a strong ideological motivation, so they shouldn't invest if they disagree with that. So they know from the beginning. I've always been very clear about that. But as long as we make compelling products, I think Tesla will do okay. So it's not. We shouldn't do okay just because the competition fail. I mean, we should do okay because we make good cars. That's the only reason.
I want to get into your visions for electric cars, Mr. Musk. When will we break the 1,000-kilometer range mark for an electric car?
1,000 kilometers. Well, it depends under what circumstances for 1,000 kilometers. As it is, the record right now for Model S is 800 kilometers. That's the furthest that anyone has driven a Model S.
So we could be close?
Yeah, we're pretty close. Now, in order to do that, they did drive at a relatively slow speed. So, we're talking, I think they drove maybe at 40 or 50 kilometers an hour or something like that. I think my guess is probably we could break 1,000 kilometers within a year or two.
Okay. Yeah. So within 2016, maybe even?
Yeah, I'd say if you say 2017, I'd say 2017 for sure.
How far can a Tesla car drive on a single charge in 2020?
Oh, in 2020? I guess we could probably make a car go 1,200 kilometers.
Okay. Is that kind of the pace going forward of
think,
improving battery technology?
Yeah, if you think maybe 5 to 10% a year, something like that.
Okay.
Yeah.
Do you have any current plans for a self-driving Tesla?
We do.
Tell me about that. Yeah.
Sure. So the Tesla that is currently in production has the ability to do automatic steering or autopilot on highways, and that's currently being beta tested and will go into wide release hopefully next month. So we're probably only a month away from having autonomous driving, at least for highways and for relatively simple roads. My guess for when we will have full autonomy is about 3 years.
3 years?
Approximately 3 years. However, regulators will probably not allow full autonomy for maybe at least 1 to 2 years, maybe 1 to 3 years after that. So it depends on the particular market. Some markets the regulators will be more forward-leaning than others. But in terms of when will it be technologically possible, I think 3 years.
What kind of cars are we driving 20 years from now?
Man, I hope civilization is still around in 20 years.
If it is.
Yeah, exactly. I think in 20 years, I think we'll see, hopefully, a very large percentage of cars being electric. Probably all cars being built will have full autonomy in 20 years. But it is important to bear in mind, like sometimes people think of cars like consumer products, like a phone or something like that. But in the case of a phone, the average ownership time for a phone is 2 or 3 years. But for a car typically lasts 20 years before it is finally scrapped. So the total fleet of cars and trucks in the world is about 2 billion. And that fleet is increasing, probably to 2.5 billion. And the new car production is about 100 new cars and trucks, about 100 million per year. So in order to change the fleet, if all cars become electric, say immediately, then it would take probably more than 20 years to change the fleet. For autonomous driving, that may be less because if autonomous driving means that fewer cars and trucks are needed, then it's probably a smaller period of time, but it's probably still at least 10 to 15 years.
Okay.
So that's an important consideration when thinking about how fast can things change in cars. And as I mentioned earlier, if you want to say how are we doing in terms of electric cars, in terms of sustainable transport, I'd say just look at the cars going down the road, count how many electric cars out of 100, and that tells you how much progress has been made. And even in a place like Denmark, which is relatively forward-leaning, less than 1%.
What can we do here in Denmark to help you reach the goal of a sustainable future?
Sure. Well, I think it's for all all companies making electric cars, Tesla being one of them. It's really important, particularly in the early days of electric cars, to have the incentives remain in place. They don't have to be there forever, but if the rug is pulled too quickly for electric cars, then you have a industry which is just a baby. It's just a little tiny thing, and it's I think too early to sort of pull incentives for an industry that is in its infancy. In the future, no problem, but now would be difficult.